Police responding to a shooting in a mall in Wisconsin. Tonight, multiple people injured. Federal law enforcement now part of the investigation. Are we getting closer tonight to emergency authorization for a COVID vaccine? The hard work still ahead tonight to end this pandemic. Refusing to concede. President Trump unwilling to admit he lost the election. We talked with Republican Senator Marsha Blackburn.
We did have the vice president come to the floor, the vice president-elect.
We love it. I could not have expected to feel so at home.
This New England state opening its arms tonight to new families seeking greener pastures in the pandemic. And tonight, the children speaking up, telling us adults the world they want to grow up in.
Never be afraid to challenge the status quo.
Good evening, I'm Juju Chang in for Lindsay Davis tonight. Thanks for streaming with us. We end the week with hope. Hope that, in fact, there may soon be a vaccine that helps us start to get control of this pandemic that has claimed 253,000 American lives and counting. Today, Pfizer took a major step and formally requested emergency use authorization for its vaccine. An FDA panel is set to look into all of this next month. The company claims millions of doses could be available 24 hours after FDA approval. All this taking place as cases continue to skyrocket and the death toll rises. Our Whit Johnson leads us off.
Tonight, from coast to coast, long lines for testing, looming holiday restrictions, and a mounting death toll. Nearly 2,000 in 24 hours as the coronavirus spirals out of control.
When you look at the number of infections that are going up, they're really breaking records in hospitalizations and numbers of infections per day.
But today, the first vaccine nearing the finish line. Pfizer and its German partner BioNTech officially applying for FDA emergency use authorization. The government has already stockpiled 40 million doses from Pfizer and Moderna. If approved, the first round could be shipped out by mid-December.
We've developed a very extensive plan. We're going to get it down to the states. The states are going to tell us exactly where they want it to be.
Still, the immediate concern is Thanksgiving. The CDC urging Americans not to travel. Every day, new crackdowns. In California, an overnight curfew goes into effect this weekend for most of the state after its worst day of the pandemic. Over 13,000 new cases. New Jersey's largest city, Newark, issuing a 10-day stay-at-home advisory starting the day before Thanksgiving.
We're asking everything to be shut down. You should be outside only if you're getting tested, only if you need groceries.
And in New York City, the original epicenter of the crisis, the mayor warning it may close indoor dining, bars, and gyms by early December. Hospitals buckling under the strain. Half of all states in the U.S. reporting massive staffing shortages. Nurses in New York City marching from a hospital to a nearby cemetery, demanding more staffing and PPE.
We are here today because we are sounding the alarm. We are about to face the second COVID crisis in the Bronx, and we are not ready.
In Indiana, respiratory therapist Amber Hodges has watched about 20 of her patients die from the virus.
They crash so fast that you don't even have a time to really think about what you need to do. It's just easier to just keep going than take a break for yourself than to let your patient suffer.
Nurse Carrie Wegg nearly lost her own life to COVID.
One of my coworkers got it, and she died. She died.
But Carrie got a second chance, receiving a double lung transplant.
I'm hoping my message as a nurse who didn't expect any of this can get out there and bring it home to people who don't necessarily want to wear masks or want to isolate themselves or quarantine. This is real.
And Whit Johnson joins us now from one of those testing sites in New York City. Whit, I know we're getting new information tonight on the timeline for the vaccine. Walk us through the next steps for the rollout.
Yeah, Juju, the FDA just announced a public meeting to be held on December 10th. Now, this is a chance for FDA scientists and other public health officials, part of an independent advisory committee, to ask Pfizer questions about its vaccine and review the data. After that, they will make a recommendation about how to move forward. The FDA commissioner is promising that the process will be as open and transparent as possible. Juju?
Whit, all eyes on the process. Thank you. And turning now to the presidential transition, President-elect Joe Biden meeting with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer today. And now word late tonight, the Biden transition team is in touch with congressional committees. Meantime, today, President Trump with a rare appearance in the White House briefing room, but still refusing to concede the election. And for the 17th day in a row, not taking any questions from reporters. Our chief White House correspondent, Jonathan Karl, reports.
The president has largely stayed out of sight since losing the election. But today he came before the cameras and falsely asserted he actually won.
The campaign, which I won, by the way, but, we'll find that out. Almost 74 million votes.
In fact, Trump lost by nearly 6 million votes nationally and by a decisive margin in the Electoral College. While the president did venture before the cameras today, he left without taking any questions.
Mr. President!
In fact, neither he nor the vice president has answered any questions in the more than 2 weeks since the election. But the walls are closing in on the president. Today, Republican state officials in Georgia, after a painstaking audit by hand of every vote, announced the state had certified Joe Biden as the winner.
The numbers reflect the verdict of the people, not a decision by the Secretary of State's office or of courts or of either campaigns.
The president's legal team is now floating the idea of trying to ditch the election results in states like Michigan and Pennsylvania and have the Republican state legislatures pick the winner instead of the millions of people who voted in the election.
Democracy is still on the ballot.
Today, the Republican leaders of the Michigan state legislature traveled to Washington to meet with the president. On the way, they were met by protesters. Some Republicans are outraged at the prospect of the president pressuring local politicians to throw out the election results. Mitt Romney tweeting, "The president has now resorted to overt pressure on state and local officials to subvert the will of the people and overturn the election." The White House press secretary insisted today there is nothing inappropriate about the meeting.
This is not an advocacy meeting. There will be no one from the campaign there. He routinely meets with lawmakers from all across the country.
But there's nothing routine about any of this. Meanwhile, President-elect Joe Biden did something today that President Trump hasn't done in more than a year. He met with the Speaker of the House.
In my Oval Office, you're me casa, you casa. I'm going to need you. I hope we're going to spend a lot of time together.
And Jonathan Karl joining us now. The president invited 2 lawmakers, John, from the Michigan state legislature to the White House today. He's been challenging the results there, where he lost by 150,000 votes. What more can you tell us about this controversial meeting?
Well, Juju, this was a meeting with the 2 Republican leaders of the state legislature in Michigan, and the legal team, the president's legal team, had been suggesting that they could somehow bypass the will of the voters and choose the electors, choose basically the winner of the presidential election in Michigan instead. These 2 leaders, Republican leaders, made it clear they would not go along with that. They put out a statement that said, in part, quote, "The candidates who win the most votes win elections in Michigan and Michigan's electoral votes. These are simple truths that should provide confidence in our elections."
And they spoke about asking for COVID funds, which I thought was interesting. And we're also learning tonight, John, that the president's son, Don Jr., has tested positive for COVID.
Yeah, Don Jr.'s spokesperson put out a statement saying that he tested positive at the beginning of the week. He has been self-isolating, the statement said, out at his cabin. And the statement also says that he is currently asymptomatic.
So many developments to follow. Thank you so much, John Karl.
Thank you, Juju.
And joining us now is Tennessee Republican Senator Marsha Blackburn. Thank you so much for your time.
I'm happy to be with you. Thank you.
Not at all. Well, let's get right to it. It's been 17 days since the election, and 2 weeks ago you joined our show and told my colleague Lindsay Davis that you served on local election commissions and that elections are not run by federal officials but by local officials. And today many of those local officials have spoken. Georgia, just a short time ago, certifying their results for a Joe Biden victory there. More states following next week. Have you spoken yet with the president-elect to congratulate him on his victory?
I have not spoken with the president-elect. We did have the vice president come to the floor, the vice president-elect come to the floor this week to cast a vote. I was presiding at the time, didn't get to speak with her, but we're watching the process play out, Juju, and just as we did in 2000 when a Tennessean, Al Gore, and George Bush were going through the counting of the hanging chads, we will work through this process. I will say now is the time for the Trump campaign, if they have their information that they need to present in court, now is the time they need to be taking that evidence to court.
And so now is clearly the time, given that the Trump campaign has withdrawn or lost court case after court case, 16 thus far. And in those courts of law, judges have seen no evidence of widespread election fraud. In fact, to the contrary, they've tossed out cases summarily. Is it time, do you think, for you and your Republican colleagues to accept that Joe Biden is the president-elect and publicly declare that?
There is a process the media doesn't declare, and as we had discussed previously with Lindsay, this is something your local and your state officials will do as they certify those elections. That is an important part of our process. I think the other thing, Juju, is this has put the attention on these local election commissions cleaning up their roles. And when you talk about Georgia and the importance of the Georgia race with the two runoffs that are there, and the evidence that has come forward there with individuals that had moved out of state or were deceased, the questions around the buckets of issues, whether it was the mailing out of the ballots, the certification when they came in, of making certain that the signatures matched before the ballot was separated. Those are things that we feel confident that Georgia will get a handle on these issues. I think also,
but I must say, Senator,
you will see in the next year, these state legislatures are going to move forward and they are going to pass laws. This is the good thing about having your state legislatures and your local election commissions in charge. They are going to be there to where they think there were gaps. They're going to be the ones that are going to clean that up. That's a good positive step.
So let me just follow up. In your earlier remarks, you referred to, I believe you referred to Joe Biden as president-elect. You certainly referred to Kamala Harris as the vice president-elect. Does that mean you're publicly acknowledging that status, aside from the semantics of declaration or, calling an election?
There will be a time to do that. Right now, it is important that we settle this. I think if every legal vote is counted, Donald Trump would get 4 more years. Of course, he is the candidate of my party, but bear in mind, and I think this is so important to keep in mind right now, we have gone through nearly 4 years of the Democrats saying, first, we're the resistance. They named themselves that. And then they wanted to obstruct. And then we had Russia and we had Ukraine and we had impeachment. All of these things to act as if Donald Trump was not legitimately elected. We don't want that to happen. We went through the entire 8 years of George Bush with people saying, well, he was not legitimately elected. Let's let the people of this country speak. It is not the job of any of the news organizations to declare the winner. This is up to the people of the country. It is up to the boards of election. It is up to the secretaries of state. And once all of that has transpired and the electors have been appointed and there is a electoral college, then that is the time to make those declarations. And at that point, whether it is President Trump for 4 more years or Joe Biden for a new term, that will be the time to do that.
Right. I want to point out, I know, Senator,
elections is the election security and election integrity is what I'm hearing more about from people, whether they live in Georgia or they are here in Tennessee. They want to make certain that these irregularities are investigated and that these are addressed.
And yet there's no proof of any of that thus far. Senator, I know you choose your words carefully, so I just want to double down on this idea that you referred to your Senate colleague, Kamala Harris, as the vice president-elect.
And what I'm going to tell you again is, I believe if every legal vote was counted, Donald Trump would get 4 more years. And then if Joe Biden is deemed the president-elect, and Kamala Harris, the vice president-elect, then we will move forward from there. And at this point, we need to have these investigations done. We need to have the Trump campaign presenting their evidence in court, and we need to make certain that legal ballots are counted.
Let me ask you about your, Senator, let me ask you about your Senate colleague from Tennessee, the retiring senior Senator Lamar Alexander. He's calling for the transition to begin so that everyone can be ready on day one. Do you agree with that assessment? I mean, Joe Biden has said that lives could be lost with delays if they aren't able to coordinate with the coronavirus task force on vaccine distribution.
Every senator was offered the opportunity to have a briefing yesterday on both vaccine distribution and on the progress with the vaccines. And I think Donald Trump deserves a tremendous amount of credit for Operation Warp Speed and for getting these vaccines to the market this quickly. It is something that is unprecedented, and I think it's going to be a tremendous opportunity for the American people to see what happens when you get government regulations out of the way and when the agencies are told to work with the private sector to make it a priority so that you solve problems for the good of all the people. And it's going to be a big success for his campaign.
Senator, that's an eloquent answer, but it doesn't answer the question I asked, which is, do you think the transition should go underway so that Joe Biden can have coronavirus task force briefings, yes or no?
There is going to be the opportunity for them as they begin to think toward if they are declared the winner, which of course right now it looks as if they are leading in these electoral college votes. And from what I'm hearing, they are moving forward.
Finally, COVID cases, as you well know, Senator, are breaking records across the country. Many of the top 100 hardest hit communities are rural areas. 250,000 Americans are now dead, 10 Americans dying every 15 minutes since the pandemic began. Putting partisanship aside, a whole host of benefits are set to expire December 31st to help unemployed and struggling Americans. Do you plan to work with Republicans and Democrats to try to get a new relief bill package?
Oh, indeed, we have been working, trying to get them. As a matter of fact, we have twice put our Senate bill on the floor. This would reposition $350 billion of CARES Act money that was left over and put it into PPP loans, into unemployment insurance, plussing it up $300 a week, money for vaccines, for testing. Of course, as you know, the rapid test is something that is important.
I appreciate your time, honestly, and I appreciate your perspective. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Yes, Juju, thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, the Senate has gone home for the holidays, out of session until November 30th. But even when they come back, Congress isn't any closer to passing a new stimulus bill to help the millions of people and thousands of businesses struggling as the pandemic continues to drag on. There are so many more stories out there, and tonight ABC's Will Carr brings us a closer look at one, a Hollywood bar that saw its promising future fade away as cases went up and lockdowns continued.
Once upon a time, in Hollywood, there was a bar where customers partied in costume, sang with friends,
newspaper taxis appear on the shore,
and in between pints, watched actor Kevin Smith, known by many as Silent Bob, record his podcast.
The Scum and Villainy Cantina, man, which is on Hollywood Boulevard in Hollywood, California.
Today, you'll find the Scum and Villainy Cantina on Hollywood Boulevard filled with silence and dust.
We were very, very excited. Right before the lockdown happened, we found out, my fiance and I, who owns the bar with me, that we were going to have a daughter. And the next week, they called for bars and restaurants to close.
That was back in March. 8 months later, with LA County still largely shut down due to the state's restrictive tier system, many Hollywood Boulevard businesses are boarded up. Scum and Villainy is still closed, and its owner, J.C. Reifenberg, says the rent is piling up.
Our rent here is $21,000 a month, which is just accruing because being on Hollywood Boulevard, we don't have outdoor dining space to take advantage of the laws that LA put in place to expand beyond. I think as of December 1st, we'll be over $160,000 behind on rent.
Since the federal government has not passed a second stimulus bill, and California has only passed legislation that allows renters to put off their full payments to next year, Reifenberg has essentially run out of options. The community, though, and even Kevin Smith are rooting for the bar's survival.
Some of the greatest nights of my life have been spent at the Scum and Villainy Cantina. It was an oasis in the middle of Hollywood. I really hope that COVID didn't kill this bar.
But even with the support, Reifenberg says he can't ask people for money since he has no idea what he'll owe when the crisis finally ends.
Even if we opened up tomorrow at full capacity with the full faith of our customers coming back, which isn't going to happen immediately, there's no way that we can pay essentially double rent after being shut down for, 8 months and counting. Since the government asked us to close down, and we did, and complied with what they asked us to do to help stop the spread of COVID, I'm hoping that they will come to our rescue.
And he's not alone. Across the country, roughly 1 in 5 businesses has closed already, leaving some to wonder if 2020 will lead to the death of Hollywood Boulevard.
I think it's going to be boarded up shops, smoke shops, 7-Elevens. You're going to lose all of the Tinseltown magic that's been built up here over the last 20 years.
It's a tragic thought for Reifenberg, whose year has been a roller coaster. Last week, he and his fiancée had their first child, a girl, and he's still holding on to hope that she might be able to sing her first song in a bar that survived a year nobody will forget. In Hollywood, Will Carb, ABC News.
Rooting for them. When we come back, the FBI is joining that urgent manhunt after a 30-year-old allegedly fired his assault rifle at an officer, forcing the evacuation of his neighborhood. The teenage murder suspect accused of killing 2 people during protests is now free as we're learning more about the weapon he used that night. But up next, no-knock warrants have been a contentious point of debate after the tragic death of Breonna Taylor. But did you know several of the officers involved in that incident also took part in another case that another family has been left outraged? Stay with us.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know seems to change, well, like every day. So what is it that you really need to know, want to know, to help you not just get through your day, but make the most of it? Feel smarter, feel better, feel happier. Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon? GMA 3, what you need to know. It's all about you. Lunchtime at 1 Eastern, 12 Central and Pacific on ABC. This is going to be so good.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march. Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown hate, the war among us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
What you're seeing right now, this is part of the eye wall. This procession of migrants goes back 2 miles.
There is going to be catastrophic damage.
This fire has made a
run. You can see those flames shooting up into the sky.
We are on the jam-packed red carpet.
To the right, guys.
So this is the fourth weekend of protest.
Watch ABC News on location for Facebook Watch.
Your mom said, comb your hair. Your dad told you, smarten up. Your dog is judging you right now. And your best friend just called you crazy. We all need someone who'll pull no punches and give it to us straight. Now imagine getting your news like that. No bull, no spin, just give it to me straight. Straightforward news, straight to the heart of the story. ABC News, straightforward.
What's the most innovative daily news podcast out there to listen to every day? Well, the Edward R. Murrow Awards say it's Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. Even the New York Times calls us a top news podcast worth listening to. So if you like getting behind the biggest news stories of the day, inside all the details, the backstory, and what will happen next, then listen to Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. It's like no other news podcast out there. Even the critics agree. Listen free on Apple Podcasts.
The death of Breonna Taylor has sparked anger and questions about the manner in which she died. Since the beginning, she was inside her home when police executing a search warrant stormed in. Her boyfriend, a legal gun owner, shot once, and police responded with a hail of bullets. In tonight's 2020, our team explores all aspects of this tragedy. But in a sneak peek right now, we want to take a closer look at the type of warrant that brought police to her home.
One David on Springfield, where y'all at?
So many things had to happen for Breonna Taylor to die that night.
Go, 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 go.
Whoever shot her is responsible for her death.
My girlfriend is dead.
I don't keep walking.
Is anyone to blame?
The system failed everybody. I think the system failed to begin with, and then I think it's a chain of events after that.
On the night of March 12th into March 13th, law enforcement set out to execute several search warrants.
All right, here you go. You want me to hit the corner and just hold? Yes.
They're going to hit 4 different houses.
Not that one, it's one over.
On one night.
An officer shot on Springfield. Let's go, let's go, let's go.
And that's how we find ourselves outside her apartment, very early morning hours, on which she's killed.
The warrant for Breonna Taylor's apartment was written as a no-knock warrant.
The no-knock warrant allows them to show up at a residence or an apartment, take a battering ram, and bust the door down.
No-knock warrants are just not common. It's some of the more dangerous things you can do in law enforcement, both for the officer and the people inside.
The opportunity to prevent the destruction of evidence is what guides the decision to ask for a no-knock warrant.
Police reportedly thought that Breonna may have been receiving drugs or holding cash. They wanted to recover whatever they could.
They knew that an ex-boyfriend of Breonna's, Jamarcus Glover, he used that address on bank statements. They knew that that was actually listed as one of his permanent addresses.
Their intelligence was that one package had been seen by Jamarcus Glover while he was leaving Breonna Taylor's place.
The presumption is there are drugs in there.
Jamarcus Glover says, absolutely not. I never had anything illegal sent to Breonna's apartment.
They said that they got verification from the U.S. Postal Inspector.
The Postal Inspector came forward and denied telling any member of LMPD that Jamarcus was receiving any packages.
He said to me in the interview, everyone's blaming the police and the street to blame.
Breonna was never someone who held money for you, sold narcotics, never held narcotics for you. No. Listen, I've been in prison for narcotics years ago. I ain't had no dealing with this.
There was a briefing that evening before law enforcement officers went out, and the warrant for Breonna Taylor's apartment was changed. Why did they change it from a no-knock to a knock and announce? Whose decision was that?
That was the detective in charge. Our intent was to give her plenty of time to come to the door because they said she was probably there alone. Banged on the door, no response. Banged on it again, no response. At that point, we started announcing ourselves, please come to the door.
Kenny says he never heard that announcement. The police, of course, say they did.
It wasn't me out there playing cowboy and being out of control. I mean, we were asked to do a job, a task. We were doing the job.
He may say, I was just doing my job. And I think response is, damn it, if that's your job, there's something wrong with your job.
I think it's crucial to understanding this story to understand that these sorts of problems are not new to LMPD. The department has had all sorts of issues, and it's had issues with police raids specifically. In 2018, 5 of the officers who were involved in the raid on Taylor's home executed a different raid on another home in Louisville.
Here, I honestly didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to think. That moment, figure, what happened? And we ain't did nothing, so there'd be no reason for them to be here.
Come out this way. Hands! Get on the ground!
The police get a complaint about someone at that address growing and selling marijuana, but they wait so long to actually look into that complaint that by the time they raid the home, someone else has moved in.
When I heard that 5 of the officers involved were not raided bloods, and Breonna's, it's crazy.
Is it a coincidence that these 2 cases happened in the same police department, similar circumstances? Or might there be something culturally questionable in that police department?
No-knock warrants, in my estimation, were many times unconstitutional because they were executed disproportionately against people of color, especially black people.
Have you ever thought in your mind, had we done it differently?
Oh, yeah. We would have either served the no-knock warrant or we would have done the normal thing we do, which is 5 to 10 seconds, to not give people time to formulate a plan, not give people time to get their senses so they have an idea of what they're doing. Because if that had happened, I'm telling you, Mike, if that had happened, Breonna Taylor would be alive.
You believe she'd be alive?
100%. I believe
if you had just stormed in?
Yes.
And not given them time?
I do.
Say her name. Breonna Taylor, a special 2020 event with the Louisville Courier-Journal, airs tonight at 9 Eastern and 8 o'clock Pacific on ABC. Still ahead on Prime, as the homicide investigation continues, the mother of the 15-year-old found dead in a sugarcane field is speaking out in an ABC News exclusive. And it's an overlooked story as the country waits for President Trump to finally concede. Other Republicans did well on election night, and that could have profound implications on future elections. We'll take a look by the numbers. But first, our tweet of the day, paying tribute to Trans Day of Remembrance during a year where more trans women have been murdered than any other.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live, the 24/7 streaming news source from ABC News. Breaking news, live events as they happen, streaming live, non-stop, straight to you. Original, on the edge, breakthrough storytelling from ABC News, National Geographic, ESPN, all designed differently for you to stream straight to any screen whenever you want, free. And imagine the most celebrated, epic live events and moments, all playing out right before your eyes.
See those flames behind me?
And go deeper inside the groundbreaking exclusives from the campaign trail only ABC News gets. Watch ABC News Live right now and anytime. Streaming on Roku, Hulu, Facebook, and abcnews.com.
ABC News Live, streaming everywhere, right to you.
ABC News Live.
The Americans here on the ground and the Iraqis, 18,000 tons. Patatas. Ismail? David.
Over ground zero from Hurricane Michael.
You can see just home after home.
David, nice to meet you.
This was your view.
My favorite bit.
Thank you very much.
Yes, mornings may look different these days, but where you start your day,
where you spend your mornings, where you get connected to everything that's happening.
And face it, there's a whole lot happening in our world these days.
where you get all the breaking new information of the day to help you navigate through these times.
That's why we're here.
Good morning, sunshine.
And making sure you start your day off with a smile and some sunshine.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America. Oh, how I love saying that.
Wake me up.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
ABC News honored winner for the second straight year with the Edward R. Murrow Award for Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news source.
This is GMA3, what you need to know. GMA3.
A third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon.
It's all about you. Lunchtime on ABC.
And now back to the election. Democrat Joe Biden has won the presidency, but down ballot, Republicans made substantial and unexpected gains that will have lasting impacts. Here's a look by the numbers. Just one Senate seat. That's the Democrats' net gain. Despite predictions they would flip the Senate, control now comes down to 2 runoff races in Georgia in early January. And Republicans gained an unexpected 9 House seats on net, setting them up to potentially flip the House red in 2022. These wins include 15 Republican women who defeated Democratic incumbents. And because Republicans won in state houses across the country, they'll now control the redistricting of 43% of the House of Representatives, compared to Democrats' control of just 17% of the nation's redistricting. This redistricting, which sometimes means gerrymandering, happens just once every 10 years. So these Republican victories will no doubt have long-lasting impacts. And we still have a ton to get to here on Prime. We have the latest on that mall shooting in Wisconsin we told you about a few minutes ago. It's the state that's been welcoming so-called COVID refugees, why some families are packing up and moving. We'll tell you where. And the town deploying monster robot wolves because, well, it's 2020, folks. But first, a look at our top trending stories on abcnews.com.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march. Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown hate, the war among us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. #1 in the morning, #1 in the evening, with America's most watched newscast. #1 in late night versus the competition. #1 in politics, and most watched on this historic election night versus the competition. The #1 daytime talk show, and #1 in streaming news. Most trusted, most watched. ABC News is America's #1 news.
What's the most innovative daily news podcast out there to listen to every day? Well, the Edward R. Murrow Awards say it's Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. Even the New York Times calls us a top news podcast worth listening to. So if you like getting behind the biggest news stories of the day, inside all the details, the backstory, and what will happen next, then listen to Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. It's like no other news podcast out there. Even the critics agree. Listen free on Apple Podcasts.
Yes, mornings may look different these days, but where you start your day,
where you spend your mornings, where you get connected to everything that's happening.
And face it, there's a whole lot happening in our world these days.
where you get all the breaking new information of the day to help you navigate through these times.
That's why we're here.
Good morning, sunshine.
And making sure you start your day off with a smile and some sunshine.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America. Oh, how I love saying that.
Wake me up.
The most powerful
powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
Friday nights, 9/8 Central. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime. 2020. Friday nights, 9/8 Central on ABC.
The World Health Organization says in the last 4 weeks there have been more COVID-19 cases globally than in the first 6 months of the pandemic.
Senator Rick Scott of Florida says he's tested positive for coronavirus. The Florida Republican traveled to Georgia last week and was seen campaigning in a crowded sports bar for Republican Senators David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler. Both are in January runoff races that will determine which party controls the Senate.
And Donald Trump Jr. announced he also tested positive for the virus at the start of the week and has since been quarantining.
You wouldn't have a vaccine if it weren't for me for another 4 years, because FDA would have never been able to do what they did, what I forced them to do.
Today, Pfizer applying for emergency use authorization from the FDA, and if it's approved, the vaccine could be sent out just hours later as part of Operation Warp Speed. Federal officials say the U.S. already has 40 million doses of vaccine stockpiled. Health experts urging Americans to avoid travel and only celebrate with those you live with on Thanksgiving. The Treasury Department is ending some of the Federal Reserve's emergency funding programs that were created to help boost the economy amid the pandemic.
Several of those programs, like the Main Street Lending Program, which provides loans to small and medium-sized businesses, will expire December 31st. The Fed responded in a rare public rebuke, saying it would prefer that all of its lending facilities are left in place to continue to support the vulnerable economy.
Kyle Rittenhouse, the 17-year-old accused of shooting and killing 2 people during protests in Kenosha, has been released from jail on a $2 million bond.
Rittenhouse claims that he fired in self-defense, but authorities say the AR-15 he used was illegally purchased by a friend and paid for by Rittenhouse. Rittenhouse then crossed state lines to the protests from Illinois to Wisconsin. It's unclear where exactly the money to make bail came from. Rittenhouse's attorney recently thanked donors to a legal defense fund.
The FBI has joined a manhunt in North Carolina for a gunman who opened fire on a sheriff's deputy last night before shooting a second victim today. Authorities say 30-year-old Robert Lee Strother fired an assault-style weapon at a Lenoir County deputy responding to a domestic violence call. He then allegedly shot and critically wounded a resident inside the search perimeter and stole a car. The deputy was treated and released. The neighborhood was evacuated. Strother is considered armed and dangerous. This isn't the latest Japanese horror film, but one town does hope it scares away some bears. Dubbed Monster Wolf, the red-eyed machine comes equipped with an infrared sensor that can detect the pesky bears. Then the real nightmare begins. Flashing red eyes, blue lights, and equipped to make more than 60 different types of sounds. More than 70 of these monster wolves have sold. One town with frequent bear sightings says ever since it bought 2 of these beasts, the bears have disappeared.
And now to a terrifying scene today inside a Wisconsin mall near Milwaukee. An active shooter. Authorities say multiple victims are wounded. ABC's Alex Perez has the latest on this developing story.
Tonight, chaos and confusion after multiple people were shot at this mall just outside Milwaukee.
Head to the mall for shots fired.
SWAT teams swarming the Mayfair Mall in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin late this afternoon after reports of gunshots and an active shooter. Witnesses describing the horror inside.
We dropped to the ground and ran in the opposite direction and found a stairwell nearby and went down to the basement of the store of Macy's and hid there.
At least 8 people wounded, many wheeled out on stretchers. An exact motive remains unclear. Tonight, the shooter on the loose, an urgent manhunt underway.
And Alex Perez joining us now. This is very much a developing story. Alex, what can you tell us right now?
Well, Juju, as you might imagine, some terribly frightening moments for people inside that mall today. Officials say more than 75 officers responded on the scene there. And tonight, they tell us, luckily, it appears none of those injuries are life-threatening. Juju?
We're grateful for that. Thank you, Alex Perez. And the family of Kawan Charles continuing to search for answers about the final moments of his life as a homicide investigation continues. But his mother, in an exclusive interview that will air tomorrow on GMA, is speaking out.
I feel like they could have done more. They didn't do what they were supposed to do. Had they done what they were supposed to do, my son would be alive today.
Footage obtained in the investigation into the death of the 15-year-old show him leaving his Louisiana home days before he was found dead in a sugarcane field in gruesome fashion, 20 miles away from his home. His family has questioned why measures such as a missing child advisory were not issued by state police, despite the family reaching out the moment they realized something was wrong. Again, the interview will air tomorrow morning on Good Morning America. Up next, to the ABC News exclusive on a huge fall from grace. The woman allegedly behind the affair that brought down Hillsong Church celebrity pastor Carl Lentz is also speaking out. If you don't know about this pastor, he had a huge following that included stars like Justin Bieber and pro athletes. Now he's lost his job and is trying to repair his marriage as his alleged former mistress is telling Amy Robach her side of the story.
Did he tell you he loved you?
Yes, he did.
Did you love him?
Mm-hmm.
The woman who says she was the mistress of Carl Lentz, formerly known as Justin Bieber's hipster pastor from Hillsong Church, is speaking out.
And I was like, are you married? And he said, I am, but he doesn't wear a ring. You never ever see him wearing a ring.
When he told you he was married for 17 years and had 3 kids, did you think, I can't be with him, I can't date him? Or did you think, I'm okay with that?
I was like, it's all good. I was married before, and I didn't want to judge him because I was like, I like to meet people and feel like they're like a blank canvas, you know? You get to know them and you let them paint their own colors on it. You don't go and just put stickers on people and think they're going to be that and going to be this. And I didn't want to do that to him because I didn't want to judge him.
Who could use a little bit more wisdom?
Lentz was known as a rock star priest at Hillsong, a church previously frequented by celebrities like Chris Pratt and Vanessa Hudgens, and followed online by more than 500,000 people.
That's why
I just want to love people more. I just want to love Carl more.
Raneen Kareem says when she met Lentz 5 months ago, they began what she calls a consensual affair, in spite of what she thought were red flags, including him telling her not to Google him, saving her number in the Notes app instead of his contact list, and refusing to tell her his last name or what he did for a living, despite regularly posting photos of himself online with Hollywood elite and NBA stars, something she says she didn't know at first.
He's like, you know, I work with celebrities, and I said, what exactly you do? And he keeps saying, I manage celebrities and I travel with them. He didn't want to say what he does.
Did you think that was a red flag? He won't give you his last name?
Yeah, it was. Because, I don't know, it was really strange.
Kareem says she searched online and found out more about him.
I realized that he's the pastor from Hillsong, and I was like, oh, I was at this church like 6 years ago.
You had been to Hillsong?
One time. Only one time.
She says she confronted him.
I told him, I know who you are, and I'm not here to judge you, but I have a question. I was like, there's something wrong with your marriage that you sitting here with me? He said, no, it's like, it's you.
Kareem says she tried to break the relationship off several times, but that Lentz kept coming back to her until late October when she says his wife Laura found out about their alleged affair.
Did he call you to tell you? Is that what he did? It was a phone call?
Yeah, he called me at midnight and he said, my wife, he was in the hallway. You can hear he was in the hallway. He's like, my wife found out and I gotta go. And I was like, I was devastated.
The next month, Hillsong firing him, citing several reasons, including, quote, moral failures. Lentz later admitting online that he had been unfaithful in my marriage without saying who he had been with. Hillsong has now begun an investigation into the culture of the church, but Kareem says Lentz's rising celebrity may have contributed to his behavior.
When you give somebody so much power, they become God to people. And I think people forgot the concept of religion and beliefs. And I think that people look at Carl like he's God to them.
I know that you've said that you have already gotten hate and people who are upset with your choices even for having the affair with Carl in the beginning, knowing that he was married. Is there anything that you would like her to know? Anything you would like to say to her if she were to listen?
I feel bad for her. You know, woman to woman, I don't think she deserved to be hurt the way that she did, and I never meant to hurt her.
Lots of food for thought. We're going to switch gears now to COVID-19 migration. You may have seen more moving trucks or neighbors packing up during the pandemic. Well, that's because millions of Americans are relocating. As campuses shut down, homes are lost, and some seek more space to roam. And in destinations like Vermont, locals are seeing a boom. Here's ABC's Ariel Reshef.
This time last year, Megan Carmichael and her young Californian family had no idea they would end up living in the woods of Vermont.
COVID was absolutely the hugest reason why we chose to leave Southern California. There was rising numbers and not a lot of precautions being taken by our neighbors and our community, so we knew we needed to go somewhere safer. We had some available funds and decided to break our lease and buy an RV so that we could travel safely across the country during COVID as a self-contained unit with our own bathroom and beds.
After 8 days and more than 3,000 miles on the road, they arrived in Western New York, staying with family.
We drove through. We started over here, and then we traveled over here, and then we got all the way over here.
But after a socially distant visit with old friends in Vermont, the young family decided to move into a rental outside Burlington.
We love it. I could not have expected to feel so at home in a place that I had never been before. My kids are over the moon at the amount of space that we have.
The Carmichaels are one of the many families who are now calling the Green Mountain State home because of COVID.
Working from home has really influenced a lot of smaller towns and a lot of smaller cities. These were places that, let's say, in the past 2 decades really saw an exodus. And now there's actually a reverse migration back.
According to a study by Pew Research, young adults ages 18 to 29 have been the most mobile during the pandemic, especially with colleges going online and record job losses. But the next largest group were older millennials.
There were a lot of people with young children who just said, if I can work from home and I have private outdoor space where I feel safe, it became a no-brainer.
This trend comes as welcome news to Vermont state officials.
We have been working for a couple years now to try to address a demographic challenge that we have identified. Our state is the second oldest in the nation, and there's a workforce shortage.
State officials hope the pandemic may shift the state's demographics by attracting younger residents.
Bringing young families into our state is so great in terms of our education system. We need more students in our school systems.
Vermont schools are funded based on enrollment numbers, so administrators say the spike in new students is beneficial.
Vermont has experienced a 20% decline over the last 10 years in our student population. So we really did have room in our buildings and encourage students to move here.
Windsor Central Supervisory Union is a small 1,000 student district and usually enrolls 30 to 50 new students a year. This year, it enrolled more than 200, with nearly half of them coming from out of state.
They moved here because it's a healthier environment. You're able to walk outside, you're able to, walk through the woods.
Access to the outdoors was a big draw for Alexis Hildebrand and Alan Richard.
As far as like a state that fully values the outdoors, I mean, Vermont can't be beat.
The Missouri natives say they had planned to move abroad, but then COVID hit, and with borders shut and infection rates climbing in their state, they started to look elsewhere.
My wife has an autoimmune disorders. We felt like our governor back in Missouri was not taking things very serious with regard to the virus, and so that coupled with people that just refused to wear masks and everything else in Missouri made it a pretty simple decision to head to a place where the correct protocols were in place. We rented a U-Haul and sold a bunch of our stuff and loaded the rest into the back of it, and we took about 3 days to get here.
Now Hildebrand continues to work remotely and Richard teaches. 12-year-old Lydia is in school.
We love it.
We love it.
There were some doubts because of our young one here. She's in middle school, but she's thriving.
With so many newcomers like Hildebrand and Richard moving to the region, local realtors say the housing market is unlike anything they've seen before.
We had calls from so many people from out of state. They wanted to see things, even if they couldn't get here. They wanted us to go take videos. Sometimes they bought sight unseen.
Realtors say inventory was already low before the pandemic, and now the competition to buy a home is fierce.
You know, and there'll be multiple offers on any one house. I mean, when I say multiple, like 5 to 10 to 12 within hours of the listing. So it's been pretty nuts.
It's impossible to say if most newcomers will stay for years to come, and it may not be known until a post-COVID era. Ariel Reshef, ABC News, New York.
And when we come back, celebrating children. Stay with us.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. #1 in the morning, #1 in the evening, with America's most watched newscast. #1 in late night versus the competition. #1 in politics, and most watched on this historic election night versus the competition. The #1 daytime talk show, and #1 in streaming news. Most trusted, most watched. ABC News is America's #1 news.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir.
We have made it through another week together.
America's most watched program across all of television.
Tonight on ABC.
Wearing number 4, please stand up. Put your hands up.
Get down on your knees.
What is this about? We're both just regular workers. There's somebody in there dead? Yeah, my girlfriend. Please, God, I don't want to be dead.
Tonight, what you haven't seen, haven't heard. Body camera video, exclusive new interviews. Breonna Taylor, Say Her Name, 2020. Tonight at 9/8 Central on ABC.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
Seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Lunchtime at 1 Eastern, 12 Central and Pacific on ABC. It's all about you.
Breaking news, context, analysis.
With today's extraordinary news cycle,
now is the perfect time for ABC News Live.
A streaming news game changer. The time is now for ABC News Live. Get it, streaming everywhere.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
More Americans choose ABC News, America's #1 news source.
And finally tonight, it is World Children's Day, everybody. First established more than 50 years ago. Each year, UNICEF says it's an opportunity to promote a peaceful, safer world for the next generation. Tonight, adults you might recognize are asking children what world they want to grow up in.
This is our planet. This is our day. A kid is just a kid, they say. But when the world opens its eyes, it will see us for who we are. Masked, not muted. You and I.
You know, World Children's Day is about listening to young people's voices and understanding what young people today want. If you had to say something to, youth around the world, young people your age, what would you like to tell them?
My message to them will be simple, that never be afraid to challenge the status quo.
If you were in charge of the United Nations, what would you change?
Well, if I was in charge of the United Nations, I would change how people think about the environment and the earth, because we only have one environment, so we need to protect it.
I'm going to give you the last word. Is there anything you would like to say to all the children around the world who are watching on this day, who would like to be activists, who would like to be more involved in the way the world should go or become?
My message could be, keep spreading peace, love, and unity. And I would like to advise, wash your hands, stay at home, and keep healthy.
Nedo, that's a fantastic message.
And before we go, one more child on World Children's Day, and it's our image of the day. This one brings us so much joy. That beautiful little baby, all 7 pounds, 8 ounces of him, is Samir Nabil Delawala. He is the second son of our politics producer, senior producer, Imtiaz, who is now spending precious time with his new son and his lovely wife and big brother, Riaz. We wish them all nothing but the best. And that's our show for this hour. Stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Juju Chang. Thanks for streaming with us.